Our next pattern that we want to talk about is something known as the master slave pattern. So, as the description sort of goes, there are two elements to this, both the master, which is usually represented at the top of sort of a hierarchy, and then beneath it, a whole bunch of slaves. So, we have in this situation, we'll just create three different slaves here. So there could be three, there could be six, there could be 1,000 different slaves. It doesn't really matter with this. All that matters is that this sort of way of controlling is unidirectional, which means that let's say that this color right here is the commands. The commands only go downwards. So the master always tells the slaves what to do. The slaves never actually they don't control the master. They don't tell it that, wait, it should do something. An example of this is for with database replication. Let's say that this is our main database, and our main database contacts, let's say, our server. Or our server contacts the database, vice versa. And then our server delivers the data out onto the web. So with the master, it's always the one that's going to be the most up to date. It's going to be bringing in data, updating data, sending out data. Now with the slaves need to duplicate the data from the master. So the master tells it maybe at midnight or 3 a.m. to update. So it'll send a command down to S1, slave one here, that says, slave one, begin copying my data to your data. And so it'll take it, it'll grab all of the new changes, and it'll update itself. And then slave one will go quiet. It won't do anything until it's commanded again by the master. USB drives or peripherals also use this. So let's say that we have a computer right here, and we have, the central CPU and then the RAM and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But what we have is we plug in a USB drive here. The USB drive is acting as a slave. It doesn't tell the processor what to do. The processor in this situation, we have the processor right here, never listens to this USB drive. It doesn't listen for, its commands or anything. The processor contacts the USB drive and tells it, okay, do whatever task we assign. So let's say we're copying data off it. It says, okay, take your data and offload it to our hard drive. So the USB drive offloads it to the hard drive, and then the processor keeps doing its other tasks. And anytime we need to actually contact the USB drive, it does exactly that. It contacts it, and then the USB drive does whatever it tells it. The USB drive is never trying to control anything else, unless it becomes a virus. In that case, the master slave sort of breaks down. But in this situation, with a normal USB drive, the USB drive is a slave in this situation. And so this, we're talking about hardware here, but with software, we can do that as well. Typically, we do this with something called a controller. So the controller is always the one that's going to be contacting all of the little pieces and telling them what to do. So with this sort of architecture, we don't have communication between our little pieces like that. That never happens. So with a controller and a master slave pattern, what we have is this controller that gives orders out. So the controller gives the orders. Then we have messages that come back up. So the messages come back up. And then if data needs to be put into these other ones, then the controller does that itself. So basically, it's a way of sort of isolating each unit here, each module, completely isolating it from one another so that we can either A, we can swap them out, we could tag them out or swap them out, and B, it allows it so that we don't have this crisscross communication here where it's very hard to track down information flow. We know that if there's bad information coming into here, it must be coming from the controller. The controller must have an error or there must be a chain, and it allows us to sort of backtrack that chain just a little bit better instead of having, like, this looks a little complicated, but imagine if these communicated, like this, where there's just communications over here and here, then this one comes down here. It's impossible to track. So what we like a lot of times is to have this controller. So the master slave is a very important pattern. It's used quite a lot, and a lot of people don't even realize they're using this pattern, but it's very good to tackle a whole bunch of different problems.